There we go. All right, and share my screen. Great. There we go. All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the 2024 Dr. Elizabeth Webb Professional Learning Series. Thank you for joining us. I'm Donna Byers. I'm a member of Large on Georgia TESOL. I'll be moderating our session tonight. Before we begin, I encourage you to become a member of Georgia TESOL if you're not already. Georgia TESOL's purpose is to encourage professional development at all levels and work to improve programs across the state that increase opportunities for our multilingual learners. Check out our website and join. We do have a few new features of our professional learning series. Our theme for 2024 is Disciplinary Language and Literacy Communities of Practice. The theme's divided into 4 strands: teaching and learning, administration, adult education and community engagement, higher education, and research. We offer professional learning twice a month addressing one of the 4 strands. Each strand has a small box that will tell you, each professional learning series will have a box telling you which strand they fall under. Tonight it'll be under administration. We also host 2 socials twice a year across the state, so we'd love for everyone to join us this spring. As we welcome, let me turn, there we go. As we welcome Blake McIntire and Terri Kotlar, please use the chat box for questions you may have. Blake McIntire has served as an ESOL consultant for Cobb County District for 2 years and previously taught ESOL in middle school classrooms for 9 years. As a consultant, he has been an active developer in streamlining processes and providing instructional support for Cobb County's 27 middle schools. He is a proud, self-proclaimed Excel nerd and is always eager to show fellow educators how simple and rewarding data analysis can be. Terri Kotlar has more than 30 years' experience in the field of ESOL, reading, language, and literacy. She spent most of her career as a classroom teacher and instructional coach and is now the district ESOL professional learning coordinator for Cobb County School District, where she actively works with schools to develop data-informed strategic plans to improve EL performance. In her spare time, she enjoys traveling to Alaska, where she hopes to retire one day. Wow. Welcome to you both. We're very excited about this evening. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and you may start with yours.
All right. Thank you, Donna, for that introduction.
You're
We
welcome.
truly appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen here. All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Blake McIntire. I'm joined by my colleague, Terri Kotlar. And we want to say thank you all, first off, to the board of Georgia TESOL for giving us this opportunity to present with you all, and to Dr. Elizabeth Webb. And especially thank you all to the members of Georgia TESOL for just taking the time to always learn more about how you can support EL students across the state of Georgia. So thank you for joining us this evening. And we're excited to share a presentation with you about how you can make your ELs count. So what does that mean specifically? So really, we're going to look at the CCRPI data for schools either in your district or maybe schools that are in your community. And we want to know, looking at that data, how can we use that to improve outcomes for EL students across the state? So again, my name's Blake. I'm joined by Terri. These are our emails, which we will share again at the end of the presentation. I'm an ESOL consultant, which means I predominantly provides instructional supports to all the middle schools in Cobb County. Terri is our professional learning coordinator. And together, one of the things that we do is we always try to align any work that we do with our mini schools in Cobb County, is we want to make sure that the work is aligned with our district's priorities. And we've put those on the screen for you to see. We want to make sure that, Cobb, first of all, is the best place to teach, lead, and learn. Okay, and that includes the opportunities that we give to our EL students. We want them to have the best learning experiences while they're in our district. We want to simplify the foundation of teaching and learning to prepare for innovation. We're always about streamlining processes so that schools can have more time focusing on the important things like instruction. Can we make our ESOL processes simple enough where high quality instruction is takes up most of their instructional time? And then we use data to make decisions. All right, so we want to make sure that our schools have the capacities to support EL students all day, every day, right? We know that EL students aren't just English learners when they're in that one ESOL segment on their schedule, 1 or 2 segments, right? We know that they're English learners all day. They're English learners in math class, science class, social studies class, all their connections classes, their electives. And so we want to make sure that our support extends to every area, every class that they attend throughout the day. We're also committed to simplifying and streamlining. That's, kind of goes with number 2 in our district priorities, is that any way that we can help schools focus more on instructional time, we're all about it. Okay. And that ties into what we're going to share with you guys today is a data toolkit. This is a very user-friendly tool that we developed for our schools to help them understand their CCRPI data and other data points relevant to English learners, so that data doesn't become this complex mathy thing that schools have to spend a lot of time on. Rather, they can quickly find their data and quickly start using that data to improve and offer a high quality instructional support. So we'd like to know, first off, who's joining us today. If you don't mind, in the chat here, I'll drop a link. We'd love to know who you are, where you're from. Should be able to access this link and let us know, are you a classroom teacher? Are you a student teacher? Are you with a university? Are you at district level? We'd love to see here on the screen who all is joining us. Okay. All right, so this is a Microsoft form here that we're using to capture the data. It's showing on my screen. Hopefully it's showing on yours as well, giving a live update. All right, looks like we have several district leaders here in the chat, or sorry, in the call. Some classroom teachers, academic coach. Okay, fantastic. All right, so hopefully whatever your role is, that hopefully what you'll see in our presentation is something that you can take back either to your school or to your district, and it's something that will be useful to you all. All right, a little bit more about us. We've some EL data for our district. You can see our active students, we're almost at 13,300. We're just shy of that. So we would consider ourselves a high density EL district. What about you? Sorry, I don't have a forms link for this one. You can just drop this in the chat. Let us know. Would you say you serve a high density school, high density district, low density?
I'm so sorry to interrupt. My screen is stuck on your response was submitted. It's not gone back to anything else.
Okay, let's see. Let me unshare and then
I might have done something wrong.
all good. Let's see.
Can you close the screen with the responses and still have your Zoom open?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
It's good now. Thank you. I see you.
Resharing.
All right. Great.
There we go. Okay. There you go. So yeah, let us know in the chat. Do you serve a high density, low density area? And this is in terms of EL population. What would you say? Okay, so few low density areas. High density. Okay, excellent. So a little bit range of everything today. Excellent. Hopefully, again, what you'll see is something you can take back, whether you do serve a high density district or low density. Hopefully, this will be relevant to you. All right. So I hope by the end of the session, here's our goal, that we want to make sure that you can understand what your CCRPI data says about your EL students in your area. And then you'll actually get a chance, it'll be kind of interactive and hands-on. You'll have a chance to practice using the toolkit that we designed, and you'll have some time to play around with it and put in some data, and it will automatically calculate some expected targets and outcomes for your EL students for the following school years. And then as we go through this presentation, we want to make sure that it's shaped around the idea that the reason we provided this data toolkit to our schools in the first place was it was all about improving instruction. So we'll also discuss the importance of providing schools with feedback and developing strategic improvement plans. All right, so here's an example of a strategic school plan that one of our schools create. On the left is like a prompt that we gave them about what would be your focus for improvement for school year 25. And then you can see on the right side is their response. Okay, just before we go any further, what do you notice about their response? You can either come off mute and share your observations, or you can type them in the chat. But the school said, we will continue to close the achievement gap in all content areas. We want to achieve gold star results. Gold star talking about, I'm sure, CCRPI and those flags you can earn, the gold star flags. Anything you noticed about their action steps?
It doesn't seem to be an action step.
There is no action step, correct? Yeah,
Too generic. Yeah, they might need to use some, Smarties,
Right, like a SMART goal template. Yeah, exactly. They haven't really framed their action steps in any sort of measurable or actionable way like that. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Yeah, no specific goals, too broad. Not really data driven either. Like perhaps they looked at CCRPI data and realized they were short of those gold stars, but it's not really clear what data points they looked at exactly. Okay, so keep this this example in mind as we move forward. Is we saw, this is a need that our schools had. It was formulating high quality, actionable, meaningful improvement plans. So the ESOL SIP process is really what shaped this work that Terri and I did together. Is we wanted to make sure that schools were focused on creating data-informed strategic plans to improve their EL progress, growth, and achievement. All right, so we asked our schools to reflect on data, and we said, based on the data, what are the successes to celebrate? What is the team prioritized as a need for improvement? What scheduling revisions will be needed? And what will be your focus for improvement? Like what would be your SMART goal, for example? Right? We wanted to narrow it down to just 4 simple questions, but meaningful questions that could drive results and drive improvement. And you notice the sentence starter that we provided to each one, it's all the same. That sentence starter is based on the data, based on the data. Okay, so any success has to be based on data. Any area of improvement needs to be based on data. And that's where CCRPI came in. This before we move on to what CCRPI is, there are many resources out there that provided by Georgia DOE that can help explain how CCRPI scores are calculated. And there's an FAQ page, and we can, by all means, we'll be able to share those with you all if you want to stick around toward the end. So just really quickly, here's the Georgia DOE's definition of what CCRPI is. Take a moment to read that. It's the College and Career Ready Performance Index. Okay. So what does CCRPI mean for schools at the classroom level? It's really all about 3 things. It's understanding how are our ELs achieving compared to last year in content areas, right? That would be a data point measured by things like the Georgia milestone tests that students take at end of grade or end of course. How are our EL students progressing toward English proficiency? That's measured by access test. And then how are our ELs performing compared to other subgroups in our schools? So that would be closing gaps. Is compared to other groups, how are the ELs performing? All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Terri, and she's going to walk us through some of the indicators on CCRPI and explain a little bit about these different indicators.
Thank you, Blake, and good evening to everyone. And thank you again for Georgia ESOL for inviting us to be with you this evening. And thank you all for coming out for this presentation. As Blake said, one of our main purposes tonight is to introduce you to this data toolkit that we created to support our 112 schools in Cobb County in understanding what the data says, what it means, and ultimately how that data matters for each individualized school context. So just to give you a little background knowledge on the CCRPI before we begin, we're just going to do a brief introduction to content mastery and closing gaps today in this particular session here. I'm going to spend about the next 5 minutes giving you a brief overview of those two CCRPI indicators, mainly so that you can see how they're scored and how the expected outcome targets are calculated. And this is going to help you understand better why we had to create the tool that we needed to create for our school, for all of our schools. So for our purposes tonight, we're going to start with a U.S. history example for a high density high school. This particular high school has over 700 ELs in the district. And as you see here, when we first click into content mastery, and we select U.S. history, there are two main tabs that appear at the top. The first is achievement levels, and the second is scores, targets, and flags. And you can see it was disaggregated by subgroup there. Now, what is important here is to remember that the score that you see listed is from school year 23. And then you see a target. And that was the Georgia DOE expected outcome for school year 23. And then next to that target, you see flags, and flags are either red, yellow, green, or green with a gold star. Now, those flags are going to come into play when we take a look at the closing gaps indicator. But for now, you may be asking yourselves, how exactly is this score calculated? And how do I know what my school's target is for school year 24 and 25, and where do these numbers come from? So recall that content mastery looks at the percentage of students scoring at each achievement level. So we have the percentage of students who scored at level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. And the CCRPI uses what's known as a weighted average approach to apply scores to schools. So a school does not receive any points for the percentage of students at level 1. And this is important for schools to understand in the calculation. This is a significant number here. But they do get 0.5 point times the percentage of students at level 2, 1 point times the percentage of students at level 3, and 1.5 points times the percentage of students at level 4. So when you add all of those up, you end up with your score for, in this particular case, content mastery U.S. history. This is the same calculation used across the other content areas as well. However, you also see not just the score, but a target, and then you see a flag. So in this particular case, why the red flag? Because the school fell short of meeting that expected target of 49.99. And we'll talk in a minute about how that target is calculated and how you will know what you're supposed to achieve as a school. So the flags across the subgroups and across content areas allow a school to see how your ELs are doing compared to other subgroups in the schools. So the closing gaps is a subgroup comparison. And you can see in this case that the ELs actually did quite well in some of the other content areas. But when we look at how ELs did in US history in particular, we see that the results are very, very different. That red flag really stands out. So how does a school know what their expected target is supposed to be? How does a school know how to actually set a SMART goal and reach that goal? So in this particular case, as Blake mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there are links to the CCRPI calculation guides for middle school, high school, and elementary school. But basically, just to give you a quick glance here, what you see in the blue box is the current formula that is used by the DOE to calculate your expected targets for school year 24, that's this year, based on your base from last year, your score from last year, and also school year 25. So you can use the same formula to set a SMART goal for school year 25. It becomes difficult when we don't get our CCRPI data until mid-year to be able to set the 24 goal. So that's why we always try to set about 2 years out. So in this case, the base you would use for ELs is the score that you had, 43.35. And when you do the calculations there, you determine that the expected outcome for this school, for school year 24, is 44.75. So, woo, that's a lot of calculating. And what we realized was we did not want schools to have to go through and calculate all of that information. So we made this data toolkit. Blake is the Excel guru. I had some ideas behind it. We put our two brains together and it resulted in this toolkit, which the schools found to be made their lives so much easier. And we did get a lot of positive feedback from it. So right now, Blake is going to show you what we created, and then you'll have the opportunity to practice with it yourself. And then I'll be back to see you shortly.
All right, thank you, Terry. So hopefully she hasn't blown anybody's mind yet with all the math that she showed on the screen, because we're gonna bring it back down to simplicity, right? That's one of our commitments in Cobb: simplify the foundation. I dropped in the chat a link to this toolkit, so you can actually take ownership of this and download a copy for yourself. That you will be the owner of this toolkit, and you can share it with your schools. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to demonstrate what this toolkit's all about. Let me pull it up here on the screen. Okay. So hopefully you should be seeing the Excel file that is our ESOL SIP data toolkit. The very first thing you see as you pull it up is a table of contents. So it's giving you quick links to all the different sections of the toolkit and all the different data points you'll want to look at as you meet with your school improvement plan team. The table of contents, it's got several indicators or several data points that are all going to come from CCRPI. We threw in 3 extras at the end, just that might be related to access scores, and we'll kind of touch on each one as we navigate through this toolkit. There's 3 ways you can navigate through it. Just like any normal Excel spreadsheet, there are tabs at the bottom. You can click on the individual tab and go directly to the page you want to go to. Even simpler than that, we've added an arrow icon. You can click on the arrows to proceed through the tables. You've got things like closing gaps, CCRPI progress toward English proficiency, readiness. This one's for high schools only. It's CCRPI readiness pathway completion. How many ELs have completed that? Those assigned pathways in high school. Same thing here for graduation. That's for high schools only. Graduation rate. Right? So you can use the arrows to navigate through at any point. If you wanted to click home button, it'll take you back to the menu. The third way you can navigate through the toolkit is just by clicking directly on these links to any section that you would want to go to. Like if you wanted to go straight to for your graduation rate, you can click on that. It'll bring you to the table. Okay. So I'm going to go to the very first one, closing gaps, EL content mastery. All right. So Terry kind of walked you through all the math that's involved on the CCRPI website. And speaking of that, that may be a thing that that schools that you serve aren't truly familiar with how to navigate that CCRPI website. So what we've done for even to make it even more simple, we included directions here on the screen. So each table, it gives you directions of where to find the data. Okay, so the idea is that they're going to CCRPI, they're following the directions here in the toolkit, they're finding the data, and they're putting it in this toolkit so that it will all be compiled in one easy place that they can easily reference later on. All right, so on the screen here, what you would do is you would go to the CCRPI website, you would make sure you put in the most current data year, which is 2023. And then for this table, you're looking at closing gaps. Okay. Once you're in closing gaps, you'll look at your summary of flags, and then you need to, in your toolkit here, there's a section where you put in the flag color for your EL subgroup. Now that's a distinction that we had to make sure that our schools understood, is that some of them by mistake were putting in the total score for all of their students. We're really only looking at the EL subgroup score. So you want to make sure you put in the flags for your ELs. So maybe in ELA, maybe they got a green flag. Okay, I'm just using some examples here. There are little drop-down icons, a drop-down arrow for you to select your flag color. Maybe in science, they got a green with a gold star. Or maybe in social studies, they got a red. You'll also find for our low-density schools, you may not have a flag color because you had too few students. So that's an option as well. You could put no flag. Okay. And then in the next column, you'd put in your score. What score did your students get in ELA? I'm just going to put in some kind of random numbers here. Maybe 77, maybe 32, 3, 50. And then maybe I had too few students. I can write that in. All right. So if you noticed, the next two columns, columns D and E, where it gives you your targets for this current school year 24, and your target for the next school year 25, those are automatically calculated for you. It's pretty cool. So so for people who shy away from the math, right? The math is done for you. And again, these are not targets that Cobb County School District has kind of created. These are targets set by the state. So this toolkit is applicable to any school in Georgia who falls under CCRPI. It's using the state formula to calculate targets for the next 2 school years. And then you can see for where it had too few students, it doesn't calculate a value because it's not numerical. Okay, and if I were to go back to the home page here, it would give me a check mark to show me that section of the toolkit is complete. Terri, anything I'm missing so far?
I think we need to share the toolkit link again.
Okay.
We've had a couple of requests for that.
Got it. So I will drop it in the chat here. Yep. So when you click on that link, it's going to ask you either to open it or download it. Either one is fine. Download it will give you a chance to save it somewhere on your computer. Yeah. So let's take a few minutes. I'll turn it over to you all. And I'd say 5 minutes or so. Let's just fill in that first table, the content, the closing gaps content mastery table. Again, it gives you directions of how to get to CCRPI, how to find the scores for the ELs, and you can put them here in the table. Go ahead and either do this activity for the school that you currently teach at, or the school that you currently work at, or if you are not tied directly to one school, maybe one school in your district, or even one school in the community where you live, maybe the school your kids go to. Pick a school here in Georgia and fill in this content mastery closing gaps table. We'll give about 5 minutes to do that. And Terri and I will be on the call if you have any questions.
So one thing I do want to talk about the green and the green with gold star, EL subgroups are, and SWDs and economically disadvantaged are the only ones who can get the gold star. So if you hit the target with other subgroups, the flag will be green. So there's sort of this special incentive for our critical subgroups to try to catch up with their peers. And that's why you can earn a gold star if you hit that 3% target with one of your critical subgroups, and ELs is one of those subgroups. So I did want to clarify that not everyone can get the gold star. It is reserved for critical subgroups.
Natasha made a good observation. In CCRPI on the website, it will show you a target. Again, just a reminder that that target that you're seeing in CCRPI is lagging data. That's the target from previous school year 23. This tool is going to calculate your targets for the current school year and for the next school year.
I have a question. I'm not able to open this on this Mac computer. I don't think the Microsoft has been updated, but would I be able to open it maybe like on my regular school computer since it has the Microsoft stuff?
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think talking to Donna, we should be able to share this just like the raw file where just you can somewhere on maybe Georgia TESOL website, a place where you
Yes,
can.
we're going to send out a recording of tonight with the all the links and everything you need.
Thank you.
Excellent.
You're welcome.
I will point out one thing as you're kind of working through the table. Everything's kind of locked down right now on this table. So the only editable columns are where the user would put in the data. So for example, I'm clicking the delete button and it's not letting me delete any of this other stuff on the screen. Okay, that's good. You don't want too many users meddling with all the cells in the spreadsheet. But since you are the owner of this toolkit now, if you wanted to edit anything and modify anything, you can actually go to the review tab, if it will let me. Give me 1 second. If you go to the review tab, you can pause protection or unprotect the worksheet. Again, I went to review and then pause protection. And that will allow you to make any edits, and you can customize it for your school or for your district, where you can, if you want to change the directions or even add different, features to the toolkit, you can do that. I would just say before you share it with users, make sure you re-enable the protection. It's not, I don't have it password protected or anything like that, but you could make it password protected on your end. All right, so hopefully you've had a few minutes just to kind of play around with that first table, fill in a few data points for your EL students. We won't have time to go through all of them this evening, but again, something you can play around with. As you go through the different tables, you've got another one for CCRPI progress. So you could put in for access scores, you could put in what, the flag color your students got, what percentage, or what score they got. And then there's another column here. What percentage of students had no positive movement, right? That's we thought that was a key data point our school should be aware of. How many students did not have any positive movement or even had negative movement? You'd want to put that number into your toolkit here so that when the SIP team meets later on, they have that quick reference point there. You've got things like the reading rate for ELs, how many ELs are reading at or above grade level, pathway completion, graduation rate. And then as you get toward the end of the toolkit, we threw in 3 extra tables. Could be, ideas for additional ways you could have your schools talk about EL data. We threw in a table for access growth ranges. How many students were in the low, typical, or high growth ranges on access test? And you can find all that information on SLDS. We'll calculate the percentages Same thing for proficiency ranges. How many students fell in each proficiency range? You can quickly tabulate that. We provide this data to our schools, not through CCRPI, but it's through like SharePoint and spreadsheets that we share with them. And then the final one would be if you broke it down even further by domain scores, when you're looking at your access data, specifically looking at students who scored 4.4 and below, right? Who are still, they're still active ESOL. You know, what two ranges did most of the students fall into for listening? Were they in the higher ranges, like in the 3s and 4s? What about speaking? Were they in the lower ranges? Would be 1s and 2s. You can have them fill this out as well. Right, access data is just as important as CCRPI. I quite agree. All right, so as you go through the table here at the toolkit, you'll get check marks at the end. They'll let you know you've completed it. So what do you do with this toolkit? That's really the key question here. Is after your team, your school improvement plan team has completed the toolkit, you'll want to revisit those questions, and you should be able, hopefully, you should be able to answer these questions more fully now. Based on the data, what were some of the successes for our ELs? What has the team prioritized as a need of an improvement? What scheduling revisions would be needed? Or if we go through the toolkit, we see that our students are struggling in math, or our students are struggling in science. Do we need to have any scheduling revisions to help support the students in those areas? Okay, and it all ties back to our SIP, our school improvement plans, right? We want the schools to complete the data toolkit, answer those reflection questions, and this is where it comes back to us. We learned that there's a huge emphasis on feedback. Any plans that schools submit, we want to make sure that we're giving them quality feedback on their plans so that they can in turn make revisions, and then they have a solid plan that they can monitor for next year. Terri, you want to take this part?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. So as Blake said, the feedback component was critical in this process. We wanted schools to look at the data. We wanted them to talk amongst themselves and prioritize their areas in need of improvement. However, when they actually submitted the plans, we did notice that feedback was essential to really flesh out how to get a more concrete action step in place, how to determine what the true priorities actually are, and where schools could get the biggest bang for buck. So you can come in off the chat if you'd like. What do you notice about this particular one? The school's action step was to focus more on speaking and writing. What do you notice about that one? You can put it in the chat too if you'd like.
These are productive domains.
So we've got a couple of domains. They know what they need to focus on. Do they have an actual concrete SMART goal here or any kind of data?
They just have a generic action step they want to take.
So this is, go ahead, Natasha, I'm sorry.
Yes, they might have wanted to really name a targeted group of their population. You're going to focus on speaking and writing for whom? Are you going to start out with your newcomers are you going to backtrack as far back as newcomers? Or is it going to be just students in, I don't know, sheltered courses? Where, who exactly?
Right,
And
they need to look at this a little bit more carefully, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is an example, and I'm going to let y'all read this here. This is the feedback that we gave to the school. So take a moment and just read this. So then after we began to give this type of feedback to schools, because we were getting a lot of generic answers in the beginning, I think we just need to kind of focus on something in general. We did start to see some more concrete plans, which we'll share with you in just a moment. Before we go to that, though, there is one more piece I want you to look at here. Can you tell me what misconception the school has in this particular example? What's the misconception that the school has about the data? And you can come in off the chat if you'd like, or you can put it in the chat. Come in off of mute.
So I'm assuming the 82 was their score on CCRPI progress, right?
Yes, correct.
The flags have to do with the content area though, and not access.
So we actually did not look at those other indicators. All of the indicators end up with flags. They all have a certain expected outcome from the DOE, and the extent to which you meet that outcome determines the color of your flag. So there
But
are
you said
flags
this is
for each.
progress, right? This is based on
Yeah,
progress.
this is on the progress.
So even though 8, never mind, I need to think a minute then.
No, that's okay. That's okay, Michelle. You were doing good. You were on the right track. They don't understand how the goals are set. Okay, I'm getting some good responses here. If you look at the feedback, go ahead and take a look at the feedback for a second.
82 was their weighted score. It wasn't necessarily the percentage of students who made progress. Yeah.
And what this let us know was, even though our schools have filled out this data toolkit, they're still having trouble understanding exactly what the data says. So this was a learning process for us in as much as it was for our schools as we went through. Here's a couple of better examples after feedback that we started getting from schools. Here's some successes that they wanted to celebrate. Instead of saying, oh, our ELs are achieving, we're happy. Take a moment to read through these.
I like these. These are really specific examples of successes that the schools were able to identify. It wasn't anything generic like our ELs are working hard, nothing. It wasn't anything like that, which it may be true. Maybe they may be absolutely working hard, which would be a success. But these are very data-driven, identifiable successes.
Okay, and I think we go to the next slide. Here's an example when a team decided to prioritize an area of need in the beginning, they said, well, we're just going to focus on reading and speaking. And so when we gave them some feedback to try to flesh it out a little bit more, why do you need to focus on reading and speaking? What's your data telling you that that's the area? Is it truly reading and speaking that they need help with? And so the school went back and revised, and here's an example of the revision. We'll give you a chance to read this one. And then last, when we get to the action steps, because ultimately that's what you're trying to do, you reflect on the first 3 questions, and then that 4th question brings you to, well, what are we going to do about it now? And this is another example of a school that originally submitted a very generic, we're just going to kind of concentrate on supporting the English language proficiency of our students. But then when they fleshed it out a little bit more and came up with more specific steps, now they can truly act upon that data. And now they can truly actually kind of cross off and check, yes, we were able to do this. No, we weren't able to do this particular step. And then, of course, look at the data again next year to see if those steps made any difference in their overall outcome. And again, we'll give everybody a copy of this. So Blake, go ahead.
Sure. So as we did this process with our schools, provided the toolkit, had them look at what the data says and then discuss it with their teams about, what the data means and why does it matter. We learned a few things along the way as well. We learned that our schools, after doing the toolkit, they had a deeper understanding of their data. They a lot of them, quickly replied back to us, said, "Oh, it was super easy for us to just, get through CCRPI and get through the website, find our relevant data, and we'd never really looked at it before or never really realized how it's calculating targets or anything like that." So the schools had a better understanding of, what that data means for them. They also had a very positive response to the SIP process, right? That they could do an easy, user-friendly toolkit and then complete 4 discussion questions as a team, right? That was it. That was the process. That was the simple, streamlined process. We also found that the toolkit needed a few minor revisions. So you guys are the lucky round 2 folks who get the improved version. But we did find little tweaks in technology that we had to make on the Excel file to make it more user friendly and more clear. And as Terri just mentioned, the feedback from us was essential to the process. That we had to make sure that anything schools were submitting, that it was being read, it was being considered, and that we were doing our part to support them through establishing concrete, measurable goals on their end. What would we do moving forward? This is kind of where Terri and I are at now, is as we've established a really solid, meaningful SIP process with our schools. But for year 2, what are some things we're working on? Is we'd like to kind of make an enhanced calculator that could do even more calculation and narrow it down, help schools narrow down the data to individual students, right? So if you're getting these scores and these targets on CCRPI, what would that mean for individual students? How would 5 students make a difference? How could 10 students make a difference? I think schools will be kind of, amazed to see that you could easily go from a red flag to a green flag by focusing on just a specific number of students. Could be 5, could be 10, could be more than that. I don't know, but we'd like to provide some sort of calculation that can do some reverse calculation and narrow it down to the student level. And then hopefully we'll be invited back to Georgia TESOL to share the results with you all. All right, so next steps, what would we encourage you all to do is take this toolkit back to your schools, and if you have any sort of improvement teams, whether it's an ESOL improvement plan team or a team that does just school-wide strategic plans, share this data toolkit with them and let them work through it. Let them see how easy it can be to compile data and identify areas where you can support EL students. And then it may, additionally to that, it may help you identify areas of professional learning that teachers may need to help meet goals. Okay. So in closing, what does this all mean and matter? Is knowing what the data says, knowing what the data means, is work that matters because our students matter. And we hope that's the message that you walk away with tonight. So thank you all again for joining us. Terri and I, we are more than happy to stick around and answer questions. We want to thank you again, Georgia TESOL, for hosting us and for all the participants and anybody who watches online as well. Thank you all for your time, and we hope that we can always partner with you in the future and help serve ELs across the state.
Thank you. Thank you, Blake. Thank you, Terri. This was wonderful. Do we have any questions for our presenter this evening?
I have one question, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I may have missed something because I was trying to take notes because I don't have Excel at home, so I was not able to pull up the toolkit yet. But just to clarify, the targets that are on the platform are the school year 23. So my question is, where did he get the school year 24 and the school year 25 targets?
That's using the state's formula that they provided in their resource guide. And then we plugged it into Excel formulas so that it automatically calculates for you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Jenny, we included that formula in the slides for you, as well as the link to the calculation guide from the DOE.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
We have a question about the recording. We will be sending out the recording in the next 2 days, so everyone will have it to go back and review the information that was given to us and how to use that Excel spreadsheet.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much.
And we do have a question. What does SIP stand for?
That's the acronym we use for school improvement plans.
There you go.
All schools in Cobb do an ESOL SIP. It's not like a punishment or anything. It's something that all schools do to help drive instruction and drive improvement at every school.
It helps schools really focus in on the EL subgroup.
Speaking of EL subgroups, so beyond the feedback, are you aware of any example of perhaps one or more schools' action steps that targeted certain group? I just would like to hear if you have that kind of information about how, prior to using your toolkit, after using your toolkit, getting the feedback, how maybe a school took action and targeted a particular subgroup of ESOL multilingual learners.
So we have 112 schools in Cobb, and we reviewed all of the plans that were submitted. We're still waiting on about 8 schools to finish their submissions. We provided feedback to all of the different schools, and many of them have made their revisions. Is that what you're asking?
Examples of action steps, I think. Yeah.
Got it.
So it was very wide ranging. Like with 112 schools, you get a variety of plans submitted to you, and every quality plan that was submitted to us, was very unique to their data. So every school has unique needs. I think some common ones we saw were maybe some red flags in a specific content area, and then as their action step, they wanted to make sure that there was a PL session for that content area, like for the next school year. They were going to schedule a PL cycle for that collaborative community. For example, let's say math. They had a red flag in math. Then in their plan, they might have said for the next school year, we want to have a PL cycle for math teachers where they can get a training on ESOL strategies that they can use in the math classroom, and then they would have regular points throughout the year where they would monitor student data and reflect as a team and talk about next steps.
I see.
And Natasha, since I'm at home, we're at home this evening, I don't have them in front of me. But you can certainly email us your context, and we can certainly help out with sending you some examples of some action steps.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for this presentation. Wonderful.
Oh, thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Right, do we have any other questions out there?
Do you have a template for the plan? Oh, we should have shared that. Yeah. Really, I mean, the template was really just those 4 questions that are in the presentation. That was really it. The main thing was the data toolkit, and then and then from there we provided a Word document where they could type their answers to the 4 reflection questions.
So again, as Blake said, we're trying to simplify the process for our schools.
Okay. I don't see any more questions, although you're still feel free to hop off of mute and ask or put them in the chat box. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.